In 2001, Rockstar Games took to the digital streets of Liberty City to deliver a sprawling, open-world crime drama that offered unprecedented player freedom. The game's visceral violence, however, drew conversation about violent video games into the mainstream once more. Welcome to Total Recall. I'm Claire Jackson, staff writer at Kotaku, and I'm joined by managing editor Carolyn Pettit to discuss the legacy of Grand Theft Auto 3. So what evolutionary game mechanics and concepts did Grand Theft Auto 3 introduce?
It's not so much that any individual thing it did felt radical. Rather, to me, I would say that it was the remarkable combination of things that made it so extraordinary. I mean, of course, games before had driving and, racing and shooting and exploration, and maybe some games took place in worlds that kind of resembled our own. But there was something about the way in which this game brought all these elements together to just create something wholly new. It was radical to be, very often up to that point, games would use, fantasy worlds, and of course they still do, and that's great. But, I played Morrowind, for instance, an amazing open world fantasy game before GTA 3. So of course I'd already had the experience of exploring a huge world and killing tons of monsters. But just the fact that, now I'm in this city that feels like a modern American city with music on the radio, with dark, grungy alleys, with, pedestrians walking around. And sometimes I'm shooting police officers instead of orcs, instead of slaying orcs with a sword or whatever. It felt so just kind of transgressive, so much more culturally significant. I mean, I think this was around a time when The Sopranos was on TV and stuff. And it just felt like, wow, this is a texture in video games that is new. This is a tone, a vibe in video games that is new. And I think part of what made it so extraordinary is that as great as all the gameplay aspects of it were, and as exciting as they were when they came together, it was also just the experience of being in that world that elevated it. So for instance, some of my favorite memories of playing GTA 3 are things like driving around on a rainy, evening, and a particular song comes on the radio that just the vibe of the song and the weather and the grungy street all just combine to create this cinematic feel, but it's emergent. It's just kind of happening to come out of the systems of me driving, the weather, the ambient weather, whatever happens to be on the radio at that time. Things like that could be really exciting. At the same time, though, I have to say that, yes, by tossing all these elements in there, Rockstar created an incredible sandbox that both had a lot of great structured content to it, but also allowed players to create their own kinds of challenges and goals. For instance, as just one small example, the only plane in GTA 3 was the Dodo,
yes.
Which, as its name suggests, it can't really fly. But, I mean, you could sort of try to fly it. I mean, I
spent many hours getting the Dodo to fly.
Right.
You'd have to go down the runway, you'd have to hold it down and then let it go at the right time. And it wasn't clear if it was designed to do that or if you were just manipulating the physics engine to a certain degree. But eventually you could get flight and it was oh my God.
Exactly.
Let's talk a bit about the violence, because as much as this, definitely was and is an incredible game and a very memorable game, one of the trickier aspects of it is just how violent it was. I mean, for me, it was the first game that I ever had an experience with where my mother found out I was playing it and then had a talk with me about the fact that she heard this game on the news and how bad it was. And so I would sometimes have to just when she was around, play the taxi missions and tell her I was playing a taxi game and I was not playing Grand Theft Auto 3.
Yeah, right. I mean, Grand Theft Auto 3, it kind of contains Crazy Taxi in it in a way,
yes.
Right? It did feel so boundary breaking at the time that it came out, and there are certainly elements of the way the game maybe treats women that I'm not crazy about.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was interesting to me with 3 how sort of unscripted the violence could be.
Right.
You definitely had missions where it was, kill this person, do this violent act that were very direct. You always had freedom as to how you could do that. But, like I had played Doom before this, and I had played Mortal Kombat, which, like we were talking before, was definitely a cultural moment in the 90s in terms of surprising people with how much violence.
Sure.
But with those games, those were clearly in fantasy realms.
Right.
And once I clear a room full of demons in Doom, I move on to the next room. In Grand Theft Auto 3, I could park myself on a street corner and kill as many people as I want forever.
Right.
If you want to play Grand Theft Auto 3 in 2023 or 2024, you have a few options. You can hunt down an original copy on either PlayStation 2 or the original Xbox. Versions also exist on Steam, for PC, and on Android and iOS. And there's also a remastered version of the game available on PS4, PS5, Xbox Series X, Xbox One, Switch, and PC as part of the 2021 Definitive Edition. That version has notoriously had a number of issues, but in the years since its release, the collection has improved. All right, that'll do it for us today. Thank you, Carolyn, for chatting with us about all things Grand Theft Auto 3. I'm Claire Jackson, and this has been Total Recall.